Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with LA-based jazz saxophonist and composer Dennis Mitcheltree. We caught up with him to talk about his long, winding road in the jazz world. He was born and raised in Wisconsin and started on the oboe and saxophone at the age of 12. He received a scholarship from the Berklee College of Music and would become an award-winning saxophonist and composer. He was a former student of the likes of Jim McNeely, George Garzone, and the great Joe Lovano. He went on to play with legends like Clark Terry, George Cables, Gary Bartz, Kenny Werner, and so many others, turning all of that into his own blend of instruction for his own students, and so much more. Enjoy his story.
Well, hey, man, thanks. I think we ran into each other on Twitter. It's great to get to know you and to see your music, and I appreciate you taking a minute out today.
Oh, it's really my pleasure. I thank you for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess the first thing I want to ask you, since we're kind of in the middle of like one of the most unique times of our American history, how have you been dealing with this pandemic and no live music and all the parameters that go into that?
Well, basically it's been a killer. The reason I do this is to be able to communicate with other people in front of other people and form a larger circle of communication. And the fact that that's not happening, it's a real drag. It's basically the second most important thing in my life. After making sure that my kids are raised right. You know, music is it. To tell you the truth, at the beginning of the pandemic, I was kind of grateful to have a little bit of time to chill, not have to run around all over the place and go to rehearsals and set things up and everything like that. But, you know, eventually the not being able to do what it is that I do got to be a real drag. You know, after a little while, I decided, well, I should probably do something with this time. So this whole backlog of music that I've had over the last, 25 years now, since I had kids 13 years ago and they became the priority, I haven't been able to do anything with all that stuff, just play music here in LA. So I decided to take the time to get that music back out there and do a new recording. Actually, the recording happened right before the pandemic started. You know, in a way, I'm trying to turn something that's a drag into something that can be positive. And that's getting the business done that I haven't been able to do in the past.
I guess that's what I've heard more and more from musicians, is that this pause in life, this forced pause, has given everybody the chance to kind of catch up on some things. And I guess ultimately at the end of the day, too, you know, this is a monopoly right now. I mean, there's no way around this. You either live or you don't.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, really, that's just kind of the gist for everybody. It's like, you know, we can't be like, well, man, if things were just this way or this virus didn't get loose. It's like there's always that possibility that something's going to happen. I mean, the fact that as many reports as we hear of asteroids that get really close to us and then somehow don't hit us is miraculous that we all, like, survive on this blue rock all the time, you know?
Yeah, when you think about it, it's really a miracle. And, you know, I've thought about that too, and you know, since before the pandemic, it's basically the impetus of why I'm here. It's like, why am I here? What am I doing here? What's the point of all of this? And I finally came to the realization that the point is to just do the best you can every minute that you're alive. Enjoy every minute that you're alive. Be as kind as you can to everyone every minute that you're alive, because you never know when this thing is going to just go boom.
Yeah. I was hearing a report this morning that was interesting about, you know, the origins of the corona. Was it a lab? Was it a bat? Was it a wet market? And they pretty much kind of got to the point where it was animals, and they carry this. And they thought in the beginning it was because there was too many numbers of different species, but what they're realizing now is that actually that's good, because it helps us beat viruses. So there's so many levels of this that are fascinating. But I guess the other part of it is that, you know, if we keep going through levels of extinction with species, it's going to be harder and harder for us to stop this tide of things like the corona coming towards us. So, again, it's another level of the fascination, the miracle of us even being able to wake up every day and sustain this for as many millions and billions of years as we have. But at any rate, I want to go back kind of to Well, before we depart Corona, let me ask you this. In this time of like self-reflection, we've all had a massive mirror thrown up in front of our lives. Mm-hmm. What have you realized collectively about the music business or jazz that maybe you didn't realize until this happened?
Well, the state of the music business for jazz is pretty dismal, to tell you the truth. If I were doing this to make money, that would have been a pretty stupid move. I think that what's going to happen, and I hope this happens, is that people have been forced for over a year to not congregate together, to not live together, and it's brought out all sorts of weird stuff from human beings. And that when this thing is over, people are going to start to realize again what the sense of community is, what it is going to a live show, as opposed to listening to something on Spotify or something like that. This music that we do is meant to communicate. It's not meant to make money, although it's nice when it does. It's there for us to talk to each other and be with each other and understand each other and become better people.
I agree. So how did all this begin for you? Where were you born and raised, and how did jazz kind of take hold of you?
I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, lived there until I was about, 7. And then my family moved to a small town in the middle of Wisconsin called Shawnee, Wisconsin. We lived on this really bucolic house on a lake. And to tell you the truth, it was a great place to grow up. It was beautiful. You could do all sorts of things outdoors in the winter and the summer. I basically swam in the lake the entire time I was there from the age of 7 to 14. It was really beautiful. When I was 14, we moved to Green Bay, which, compared to Shawnee, Wisconsin, was a teeny metropolis. Although I think it's a city of like maybe 100,000 people at most. And I was always, until that point, my parents had a piano, and my sister took piano lessons. I don't know why I didn't, but I remember I used to just sit at the piano and try to figure out stuff and just play around with it. And apparently I was fairly musical from the very beginning. In 6th grade, the band, they started me out on oboe, and I was pretty successful at that through being a senior in high school. The next year, I learned how to play the saxophone for the jazz band in the middle school that I was at, starting out on baritone saxophone, and then the next year switching to tenor. And I always loved music. I always felt it was a language. It was a language that I felt I understood, but I didn't really understand, and I always wanted to know more. We moved to Green Bay right before my 9th grade, and at that point, music really started to take hold. As I was getting older, I was looking for something that seemed to make sense, because this whole basically bourgeois way that we have as Americans is it's unfulfilling. And I saw what was going on around me, and people were nice, people were happy to a certain extent, but I don't think that they were really fulfilled. And so as a teenager, I was looking for something that would point me in a direction where I felt something was real and true and worthy. And, when I was 15, I think, even though I've been playing in the jazz band, I didn't really investigate the genre that much. But when I was 15, I was hanging out with some older friends who were in the high school jazz band, and I started to listen to John Coltrane and Charlie Parker. And when I heard that sound, man, it was just like, wow, that right there, that's something worthwhile. That's a language being spoken, and I want to learn that language. And so basically from the age of 15, I decided I wanted to pursue music, and I did. And I found the confines of the jazz band in high school to be a bit rough. So I started to try to branch out with other musicians in the area, performing with college jazz bands. I can't remember which UW that was. And eventually I decided I wanted to become a professional musician, and I was given a choice to either get a great scholarship at the Wisconsin Conservatory in Milwaukee, or a somewhat smaller scholarship to go out to Boston, to Berklee. And I picked Berklee because I wanted to be on the East Coast, because there's just so much more happening out there than there was in Wisconsin, certainly, and even in Chicago. And so I split, man. I got out there, started hanging out with people. It was great.
What was the first live jazz show you ever saw that really got you thinking, man, that'd be great to get up there and do that?
Well, I in the Green Bay area, there was a band, what's it called? Fire and Ice, with John Harmon on piano and a saxophonist named Tom Washatka. And, once I got interested in music, my parents were pretty helpful, even though they didn't understand the genre themselves. And they would take me to some concerts and like some clubs, because in that place you could get into a club even if you were underage, as long as it was about the music. I really dug that. I mean, it just showed me that there was so much more for me to reach for than I had been doing. So that really killed me. That was great. But, the thing that really got to me was I went to the Chicago Jazz Festival in Grand Park when I was 17. And, I saw all these great bands. I saw Warren Marsh. I saw Miles Davis. I can't even remember who else was there. But just being in that atmosphere with, I don't know how many thousands of people with this huge stage and feeling the music just vibrate my body, and it just killed me.
Wow. So you've been in LA for quite a while, and I always hear about the different flavors of the jazz community, and I know LA, there's a lot with film and TV and all of that. What's the LA scene like? I know you've been, essentially the Midwest, and you've been to the East Coast. What's that scene like?
It is very different than New York. Basically in New York, what happens is you are allowed to figure out who you are, and then when you play with people, you're allowed to be who you are, and you try to work together. When I moved to LA, what I found out pretty quick was that the culture was very different. First of all, people don't say whatever's on their mind whenever they want, like New Yorkers do. So I had to learn how to just kind of be quiet and listen to people for a little while before I spoke, and that took a minute. But the big thing was the studio system that used to be prevalent in LA and no longer is. I mean, there's a little bit of high-end stuff, but not much. Had spawned all these great players. I mean, they can play the crap out of not just the saxophone, but all the saxophones. Not just all the saxophones, but the flute and the clarinet. Some cats do oboe too, and it's just, it was like, wow, totally different scene. And the emphasis is on not being who you are, but bringing to the table what's appropriate for the situation. I ended up playing with a lot of big bands in LA because that's mostly what there are. And for me, it was really a shock because I had to distill, when I take a solo and develop something when I was with a band in New York, I could take however many courses I wanted to develop that solo. But playing in these bands in LA, man, you get 16 bars, and you better make the best of that 16 bars. So at first, I was sitting there trying to develop stuff while I was taking a solo. And then I realized, no, that's not really how this works. You just got to go right from the very beginning. And, once I realized that and started working on having that be part of the thing that I do, it was much easier for me to fit in to this situation. And, man, there's some great players here. Even just on the jazz scene, there's like Doug Webb playing saxophone, who I've been fortunate to play with my group and with Bill Holman's big band. And who else? Carl Saunders, great player. And there's just so many good musicians here in LA. But to tell you the truth, there's not a lot of personal music that's being played like it had been when I lived in New York.
Well, you've been around a lot of heavy hitters. You kind of touched on some, Clark Terry, Howard Johnson, Kenny Werner, Charlie Persip, and you can go on and on. What did you learn from the legends of jazz that in turn helped you teach younger cats that you've gotten around?
I think that probably speaks more to how it is that I learned to do it. As far as being a teacher goes, at whatever level the student comes to me, I need to really assess where they are and even try to figure out where they want to go. And sometimes that means that a student has to start at a level a little bit lower than they think they are. And that can be a little difficult. When I was learning, I never had I had great teachers, but they were more like mentors instead. They didn't tell me what to practice, what to do, what direction to take. They just said, let's play. And that was really cool. But to tell you the truth, I think that my development probably could have gotten a little further if I'd had a teacher who really took the bull by the horns and just said, hey, look, you need to do this.
Talk to me a little bit about what's the best part of waking up every day knowing you're a professional musician. What do you look forward to?
Just playing, man. I mean, right now I'm rehearsing twice a week with a trio, and what we're doing is we're playing in an open air garage, and man, just playing music is that's the best thing about being a jazz musician. Actually, none of the other stuff about being a jazz musician outside of the community when you're playing is all that fun or all that easy. As I said before, the business aspect of it is really can be quite a drag.
Let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into your younger self around the time that you were becoming a professional, and you could give your young self one piece of advice based on what you've learned out of all these years. What would it be?
Oh, man. That's a tough one because, I think that my personality is such that if there's something that I think is worth it, even though I don't know much about it or don't know how to go about it, I pretty much just went full steam ahead. And to tell you the truth, I think that served me well. What could I say to myself? Maybe just chill out. Just do your stuff and chill out. I mean, that's probably it. It's very easy to get when you're young to get into the am I good enough? Am I practicing the right things? Do I know the right people? All this sort of stuff that actually has nothing to do with music. It has to do with your sense of self-worth or lack thereof. And not that I felt I was unworthy, but I just thought about it too much. It was too much part of what it is that I was doing in that scene for a while.
So, obviously this year has been really tough on clubs. The Blue Whale and other places have closed, but we're going to get back. There's going to be clubs, new ones will open, and when that happens, and we get back to some level of earnesty, what do you hope we all realize about the power of live music when you return to the stage and we return to the audience?
Well, like I said earlier, I think that people need this. New York is the kind of place where people are walking down the street and they pass a place with a sign on it where there's live music and they want to do something, they go and do it. In LA, it's very, very different. Everyone drives everywhere, and so there has to be a destination. Now, I'm hoping that this lack of being together during this time is going to make people re-examine that and understand that, waking up in the morning, going to your garage in your apartment building and driving to your work and parking your car in the garage there, and then doing your work and then getting back into your car in the garage there and then driving back to your own garage and then coming home and putting on a DVD. Well, I guess not a DVD anymore, but streaming some kind of video until you do the whole thing over again tomorrow really isn't fulfilling. I have great hopes now. I'm a little bit worried because, this has been going on for a year. I'm wondering why some of these venues haven't set up some outdoor performance situations where we can play. It just seems like it's not happening. So many places went under, like you said. And, it's going to take a while for new venues to pop up to do that. But I hope that people will just realize how important this is to them. And, so that there's a customer base for clubs like that to reopen.
So my final question to you is this. Everyone has a perception of you and who they think you are, family, your friends, your fans, but you're the one living your life. Who do you think you are?
Oh, man. I feel like I'm in analysis.
You're in the psych chair right now.
No kidding. I don't know. I mean, what I'd like to think about myself and the way that it is that I go through life is that I bring as much beauty and positivity into the world as I can. Now, sometimes that means examining the darker parts, the sadder parts. In fact, often, because if you don't bring those out, you're really not dealing with a part of who you are. I like to think that I'm kind, that I'm helpful, that I'm professional, that the thing that I do can bring happiness, joy, any kind of feeling to somebody else so that we can work together and make the world a better place.
Right on, Dennis. That's a great answer. And I really appreciate you, again, taking some time out. Thanks for the music. Good luck with the return to the stage and everything beyond.
Thank you, brother. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview. We give you a bit of insight into the finest cats in Wisconsin, Los Angeles, New York City, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. Thanks to Dennis for his time, music, and story. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit Neon Jazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.